Hey everyone, Duke Nougat 3D here with another mask in my collection for you guys, and today I have a mask that I know little to nothing about. This is another mask that I got off of Moulage during our visit, and this is a clone of the MBU 13P oxygen mask made by a company called Norton, and it is basically an industrial supplied air respirator. Again, I don't know anything about this really. Information is scarce and cannot be looked up immediately. I know Moulage probably has a bit of info laying around here and there, and if he does come through that, I'll probably update it in the description. But for the meantime, I'm completely clueless on this thing, and information is lacking. But I can tell you that it is based off of the US military's MBU 13P oxygen mask, which was designed sometime in the 1960s, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it was fairly successful, and as far as I know, the MBU 13P is still somewhat in use today as a training mask. However, it has been replaced by later and subsequent oxygen-supplying full-face masks. I believe the JSAM series masks are the current replacement. But anyhow, the MBU 13P face blank found its way into the industrial market pretty fast, and there are just dozens and dozens of clones of the original MBU style face piece, and this is a pretty typical example of one of those industrial clones. And in fact, I should mention that a Scott Aviation produced MBU for the commercial market was actually used on the Apollo spacecraft for emergency oxygen supply in case of a fire in the cabin. But anyways, back onto the Norton copy here. It really is nothing special to look at here. It looks pretty interesting on the exterior, but once you actually hold it and look at it, you can really tell how basic this mask is, and I'll get into that just in a moment here. So as you can see, the face piece is made entirely out of a teal silicone, which is fairly comfortable, but I find that it doesn't seal the greatest. I think it may be just something to do with the general layout and design of the face piece. I don't think it's anything to do with the material itself, but for whatever reason, this mask I find difficult to seal against my face, and it's sealing even worse against my display head here. It does have a central outlet valve on the front here, usually on the MBU 13P, at least the military ones. These would be spring-loaded. These would be like pressurized so that it would rely on the supplied air to relieve the pressure. But this is just a normal outlet valve disc, and it's not held on with anything. It's just a flange on the actual valve seat that's kind of held in place on the mask. So kind of a simple design, really nothing to gawk at, but it's there and it works, so nothing to be worried about, I guess. And the lens, as you could probably obviously see, has a very decent field of view. You may notice that this particular lens has a label on it. This was actually used at some point, and it cleaned up fairly nicely, so I'm pleased about that. The lens frame is interesting because it is one of the only parts, well, not one of the only parts, but out of all the plastic hardware on this mask, or just very thin, benign metal parts, this is obviously the most durable thing on the face piece. It is made entirely out of cast aluminum, and they could have just as easily made this out of plastic, but for whatever purpose, they decided to go with die-cast aluminum. Not that I'm complaining or anything, it just seems kind of like a strange design choice. Looking through the lens, you can also see the two prominent TISO deflector tubes, which do their job, especially since the mask lacks a inner oronasal cup, which would have been helpful, but it is what it is. The hose stem of the mask is interesting because if you look closely, you can see that this hose is not actually a standard gas mask hose. This is probably at least a quarter inch less in diameter than a standard 1-inch gas mask hose. I'd say this is probably like 3/4 of an inch in diameter. I'm not entirely sure, I haven't measured it, but it's definitely nonetheless much thinner than a normal gas mask hose diameter, and there's a cast aluminum adapter inside here holding that on, and there's just a standard worm gear hose clamp, and then there's a Tenorman clamp holding the adapter in place, and this could easily be swapped out with a standard gas mask hose if need be. Before anyone else questions about this, I have no clue what this is. This little dongle underneath the freaking outlet valve. I believe that on the MBU 13P this would be a moisture collector or a moisture trap for condensation. I really have no clue of its purpose, but it's there. So yeah, you have a valve penis on it, so that's great. So moving on to the hose. The hose is fairly interesting because, again, if it's smaller diameter, I've never really encountered too many hoses like this. Usually most gas mask and respirator hoses are the standard 1-inch, but this one, they decided to be special snowflakes about it and made it this thickness, so whatever. And then obviously on here is the Airline adapter / regulator assembly, which has a nice belt clip on there, and it would hook up to the supplied airline from the compressor. And you have this knob on the top here, which allows the change of airflow to occur. I believe the tighter down you have it, the more air can pass through, and the looser you have it, the less air can pass through. That's basically how I think that works. I haven't really checked to be sure, but from what I could tell, that's what it's like. And you have some stamps on the side here. They're probably a bit hard to see from the camera due to my poor lighting, but mine is dated between 1980 and 1983, and there's some not Bureau of Mines, just some serial stamps and other things there. So, and then on the top here, you can see a number 140 engraved into the top of the lens frame. I assume that was done by the user to indicate his issued mask. And then there's a Norton logo on the left upper hand side of the face blank. And aside from that, there are no other markings. Before I move on to the interior and wrap up the review, I'd like to talk about the harness, which is easily the worst part about this mask. I find the material very unmanageable. It's not very stretchy, it's very stiff, and it doesn't like to be adjusted very well. And it just overall has a poor fit. It's not that it's particularly uncomfortable, it just seems like a very poor harness design in my opinion. But, you know, you gotta make do with what you have. So, now that that's done, I will bang stuff around here. So I will remove that off the head, and I will flip around the harness, and I will show off the interior, even though there really is nothing to see, but well, maybe one or two things to mention. So, as you can see, here's the interior of the mask. Pretty barren. You can see the rivets where the harness buckles are attached to the face blank. And this is another one of the lower quality aspects of the mask, is that there is no chin cup at all. There is the interned periphery face seal, and that sort of acts as a chin cup, but it really has no molded, dedicated chin cup, which is, again, probably one of the downfalls of this mask design. But other than that, I'd say it's pretty okay-ish. It's definitely higher quality than a lot of other industrial masks. I mean, for the most part, not American ones, but like, you know, I'd probably want this over like a 3M respirator in all honesty. But anyhow, that's enough brand recognition. So, as you can see, the TSO tubes on the inside are pretty benign, and they don't really stick out as much as other ones do. And you can clearly see the outlet valve throughout the back there. And there does not seem to be any sort of provision for an inner oronasal cup as far as I can tell. And the only other thing to mention is that on the inside here, you have these two tabs, similar to the MSA Clearview, I might add. These tabs for attaching some sort of optical insert system. But I do not know what that looks like. I do not know if it would be interchangeable with the MSA Clearview type, which I also don't know what it looked like. So, you know, that's there, and that's a feature. So I will put it back on the head here as best as I can, and I will wrap the video up for you guys because I don't want to ramble on about a mask that I know little to nothing about. So just give me one moment here. Again, the harness is being quite difficult. There we are. So that is it. A mask that, again, I have no designation on, and that may change when I get more information from Moulage, but very appreciative of this. This is certainly a very strange mask, and there are a lot of odd features about it that I find interesting, and it's just a nice piece to have in my collection. So, again, thank you for that, Moulage, and feel free to update me with any information that I may have gotten wrong or lacked thereof. So, anyhow, if you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them in the comments below as always. I'm Duke Nuka 3D, and I'll see you all later.